Years ago, many Bahamians discovered Bahamas Faith Ministries, a revolutionary and impactful ministry, transcending national borders and challenging traditions. The goal then and now was transforming followers into leaders and leaders into agents of change. We have gone through tragedy and triumph and have emerged with a new focus and a renewed vision. Rediscover the worship and the message of the kingdom and see what's new about BFM, now led by Pastor Dave and Angie Burrows, multi-generational leaders focused on making the vision plain to a new generation. There's a place for everyone here. Children, youth, millennials, singles, families, professionals, and entrepreneurs. Join us Sundays at 10 at our Carmichael Road campus or online via the BFMI app. We promise you, your life will never be the same.
Today we are here to share with you some principles on leadership and business success. I want to begin by talking about 5 keys to life and business success. Key number 1, say this with me, say recognize. I have a question for you. And this question I want you to ask yourself. Who are you? Do you know who you really are? This is a picture right here. This is a picture of me. Many, many years ago. As a teenager, I began a career in the pharmaceutical industry at the age of 12. But I didn't have a license to sell the pharmaceuticals that I was selling. If you're with me. So I began selling packages on the street. But was that who I really was? The problem is I didn't know who I was. At the age of 12, I started smoking marijuana. At the age of 13, I became a drug dealer. At the age of 14, I assaulted a teacher, got thrown out of school. At the age of 15, I assaulted my own father, got thrown out of my house. At the age of 17, I led the police on a high-speed chase. Ounce of marijuana in the car, 40 pounds of weed at home. Ended up getting locked up, and through a miracle, I got out of that situation. And it wasn't until a couple of years later in college that I discovered who I really was. You see, I was living a life without recognizing who I really was. Say that with me again, say recognize. Here's some things I want you to remember about recognition. Whatever you don't recognize, you will never change. How many of you have heard of the story of the prodigal son? Raise your hand if you've heard the story of the prodigal son. There's a part of the story in the prodigal son where the statement reads like this. It says, and when he came to his senses. In other words, he finally figured out who he really was. He had money, he had fame, he had friends. And when he lost everything, then it says he came to his senses. Sometimes you have to go through some things to recognize who you really are. What you don't see, you will never incorporate into your life. There was this young lady, and she had a boyfriend who was a painter, and he used to do these paintings. And she would go over to his house on a regular basis, and whenever she went over to his house, she would take a look at his paintings. And one day she went over to the house, and he had a painting, and the painting was covered. And she said, "What are you painting?" And he said, "Well, you know, I can't let you see this one." She said, "Well, what are you painting? That's so important." He said, "Well, I'm painting a picture of the most beautiful girl in the world." So she looked at him and she got angry and she walked away and she said, "What?" And he said, "Hold on, I can explain." And she said, "I don't want to hear your explanation." And so she went off to college. And at Christmas, she came back home and she was walking downtown and she saw all of these people gathered around this store window. And there was a caption above the store window, and it said, "The most beautiful girl in the world." And when she walked up to the painting, she realized it was her. The problem was that she didn't recognize her own value. Everybody say recognize. You see, in life, you have to recognize shifts and seasons. We live in a world where things are changing. They say one of the largest hotel chains in the world doesn't own any hotel properties. The largest retail organization in the world, Amazon, doesn't have any stores. We have Tesla that has fully electric cars. So to lead, you must recognize where things are going. Leaders see the future before the future happens, and leaders also recognize trends so they can know which direction to go in. Another thing that you have to recognize is your strengths and your weaknesses. Recognize your talents and your gifts. Everyone has a gift. You know, I heard a young man say one day, he said, well, you know, I wasn't educated. I didn't go to college. I don't have any gifts. And he thought that he didn't have any gifts. But he used to drive a taxi. And while he was driving the taxi, he would tell jokes. And so customers would come in his car and they would listen to him tell jokes. And one day he picked up a customer at Atlantis. And the guy came into the car with a frown on his face. He was angry and he was all messed up. And he started telling jokes. And as he began to tell jokes, the guy started laughing. When they arrived at the airport, the gentleman asked, how much do I owe you? He said $35. The guy went into his wallet and pulled out 10 $100 bills and paid him for his gift that he didn't know that he had. Everybody say recognize. You have to know your worth. You are worth more than you think you are worth. You also have to recognize who are your friends and your enemies. You have to recognize who deserves your time. You have to recognize your true value. One of the things that leaders do is leaders recognize need and opportunity. You see, wherever there's a need, there's an opportunity. There was a story that was told some time ago about two young men who went to India. And when they went to India, they saw thousands of young people bare feet. And one of them said, man, isn't that a tragedy? And he started to lament the condition of these young people with no shoes. And the other one decided to start a shoe business. You see, leaders recognize need and opportunity. Facebook actually is an opportunity. Some people use Facebook just to post silly stuff. But do you know Facebook can make you money? YouTube can make you money. How many of you in here today, you have a YouTube channel? Who has a YouTube channel? You know, you're laughing about who has a YouTube channel, but guess what? Let me tell you something about YouTube. A YouTube channel is free. And if you post things on YouTube that get enough hits, YouTube will pay you. There was a young lady, she had a son who went to the dentist. And on the way home from the dentist, she just took a recording of his reactions. He was still under anesthesia and he was saying crazy stuff. And she posted it on YouTube, even by mistake. And years later, she's still getting royalties from that one little silly video. I met the young lady. I was in a board meeting with her in Jacksonville, Florida. And she said when YouTube called her, she said she hung up the phone because she couldn't believe it. But you see, there are opportunities out there for you, even as young persons, if you recognize. But if you don't recognize it, then you don't take advantage of it. Everybody say recognize. One of the most important things to do in life is to make yourself visible. Whatever your talents, your gifts, and your abilities are, people need to know who you are. Let your light shine. That's what the Bible says. So what's the first word? Say it louder. What's the first word? The second word is organize. So everybody say recognize, organize. Now, if you recognize and you don't organize, it means that you are aware of your potential, you are aware of opportunities, but you haven't mobilized to take advantage of them. So the way you take the next step is after you recognize, you have to organize. Now, how do you organize? You organize with a plan. Let me ask you a question. What's your plan? How many of you have a plan? How many of you have a plan for the next 15 or 20 years? Raise your hand if you have a plan. Here's the deal. No plan, no progress. If you don't have a plan, it's difficult to make progress. A failure to plan is a plan to fail. If you're going to build a house, what's the first thing that you have to do to build a house? Do you show up on the property and start laying blocks? No, you have to develop a plan, and after you develop the plan and you get approval, then you begin. You see, your life is more important than building a house. So what you need to do with your life is you need to finish your life now before you get started. And once you finish your life, then you can start it effectively. In order to finish your life, it means that you need a vision and a plan. I remember when I came from college and I got married, my wife wasn't working and I was working for the government, and so they started to take out salary deductions for different things that I was purchasing. And at the end of the day, my salary only allowed for me to have an extra $100 at the end of the month. And so I had to live off of $100. So I faced the dilemma. What do I do? Do I go back into the industry that I was in when I was 13? Or do I develop an increased plan? So I developed an increased plan. You know what my increased plan was? My increased plan was I was always a business person, so I had to find a business to increase my income so that I can take care of my family. So one of the things that I did was I looked around the neighborhood and I looked for opportunities. And I realized that everybody had a yard. And everybody needed their grass cut. So I sold my car, bought a truck, got some guys to work with me, and I started a lawn care business. And so it increased my value. A few years later, I realized that computers were coming into the forefront. And so I started learning about computers. And I started with an investment of about $1,500 where I borrowed from my life insurance. And that company that I started, the computer company, grew from the first year of doing about maybe $15,000, $20,000 to $70,000, to $90,000, to $250,000, to $750,000. To 900, to 1 million, to 1.5. And I was able to pay for my kids' college, to increase my value and my income simply by having a plan. What's your plan? What's your plan for the future? What's your plan 10 years from now? Everybody say organize. Now, there are several plans that you need to consider. First of all, if you're going to go into business, you need a business plan. One of the materials that you're going to receive today is a book that I wrote, and the book is called How to Start and Run a Business. If you're going to go into business, you need a business plan. If you are living, you need a life plan. If you're going to build a house, you need a house plan. If you're in a relationship, you need a relationship plan. A lot of people get into relationships and they have no plan. They meet somebody at a club. The same night they end up in the bed and they say, by the way, what's your name? And you know what happens? They end up with issues because there was no plan. And then you have to have a plan for your spirit because we are three-part beings, spirit, soul, and body. So you got to have a plan. And here's the thing about a plan. If you've never written it down, it's not a plan, it's a thought. I want to say that again. If you have never written it down, it's not a plan, it's a thought. How many of you've written down a plan before? You've written a plan of something before. Okay, I want to encourage you after today. Everything that you want to do in life, write your plan down. Because if you don't write it down, it's just a thought. And thoughts vanish after a period of time. And guess what? A plan does not have to make sense to everybody. I want to tell you a story about a 14-year-old girl. This is a true story. It was on CNN in Florida. She developed a plan, but the plan didn't make sense to a lot of people, but it made sense to her. And you see, your plan doesn't have to make sense to everybody. It just needs to make sense to you. In 2008, when they had what they call the Great Recession, all of the home prices were going down and people were going broke and losing money. And a 14-year-old girl, after she recognized what was going on in the marketplace, she realized that the homes in her community had gone to rock bottom. And so she started selling little trinkets and lemonade and different things, and she saved up $6,000. And she borrowed $6,000 from her mother, 14 years old. And at the end of a year, she purchased a house. She purchased a house for $12,000. And then she put the house on rent. $700 a month. How much is that in a year? Where are my smart students at? How much is that in a year? $8,400. How much is that in 10 years? And guess what? The property values recovered and appreciated. Now, it doesn't make sense for a 14-year-old to buy a house. How many of y'all been thinking about buying houses lately? Anybody been thinking about buying houses? Well, we got some people here who... But most 14-year-olds don't think about buying houses. You see, a plan gives God something to work with. There's a saying in the Bible that says, little becomes much. And guess what? Here's something I want you to remember. A complaint is not a plan. There are a lot of people in the world, the thing that they do best is complain. I don't like the government. I don't like my teachers. I don't like the people in my school. And they complain, I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I need to change my wardrobe. And so people spend their lives complaining, but a complaint is not a plan. You have to focus in on a plan. Now, in order to be effective in a plan, you got to do several things. First of all, you got to get training and research. In other words, go and find the information that's associated with your opportunity. So whatever you are thinking about in life, learn about it. YouTube and Google now, they can teach you just how to do just about anything. There was a young man that I know, he didn't finish high school. And he decided to learn mastering of music. He never went to a college. And today he has a studio where he masters music right here locally in the Bahamas. So you always have to have a plan. And one of the most important plans that you need to have is what I call a stay here plan. You see, on earth, in order for you to be a success, you have to be here. You have to make sure that your body remains on this earth. A lot of people don't have a stay here plan. So because people don't have a stay here plan, they do stupid things like I did. They risk their lives for acceptance. Some people join a gang. And when you join a gang, what you are doing is you are risking your life unnecessarily. I was watching a video on YouTube the other day, and they have some gangsters in LA, and they were interviewing this guy. He was a former gangster, been to prison several times. And they asked him, they said, what do you think about today's artists and rappers, after they have become rich and famous, becoming affiliated to a gang. And he called the name of Chris Brown and Soulja Boy and Lil Wayne. And he said, these guys did not grow up as gangbangers. He said, they have to either be stupid or mentally ill. Because here it is, you have already achieved the things that you want to achieve, and then you are affiliating yourself with a group where you're going to be shot at. And the gangbanger said, you know what? They need to go in their yachts. They need to go fly around in their planes and enjoy life. It doesn't make sense. Are you with me? You got to have a stay here plan. You see, animals risk their lives for food, but humans risk their lives for love and acceptance. What's the first word? Say it a little louder. What's the first word? What's the second word? The third word is what? Strategize. Okay, so you recognize and you organize. Now it's time to strategize. How do you strategize? You strategize by determining the steps to help you to accomplish your plan. And what's the most important step? Can somebody tell me what's the most important step? If you want to do something, what's the most important step? Anybody got an idea? Plan. Okay, plan is important. Okay, anyone else? Okay, let me tell you what the most important step is. I'm going to show you the most important step through a story. There was this old man who was in a boat, and the boat was offshore, and he had two young guys in the boat with him. And so he began to come to shore, and as he began to come to shore, he said, stop the boat here. And so he stopped the boat, and he stepped out of the boat and walked on the water all the way to shore. And so as he was walking to shore, the guys in the boat, they looked at each other. They said, man, you see what that old man did? And they said, man, how did he do that? So one guy said to the other, he said, man, if he could do it, we could do it. So the first guy stepped out of the boat and he sunk. Went back into the boat. The second guy, he stepped out of the boat, he sunk too. So they sat in the boat and they waited for the old man to come back. And the old man came back walking on the water. The old man was walking and came in the boat. And so they said to the old man, they said, excuse me, sir, explain to me, what is the difference between us and you? We tried to walk on the water and we couldn't. And you walked on the water. What's the difference? So the old man looked at them and said, young bloods, the difference between me and y'all is that I know where the rocks are. And you see, in life, some of y'all are slow in getting that. You see, in life, sometimes you need to find somebody who knows where the rocks are. One of the most important strategies for success is finding someone who's been where you want to go. Wherever you want to go in life, you need to find someone who's been there. If you want to be a doctor, where do you go? You go to the hospital and you find someone who's already there. If you want to be a singer, you find someone who's already there. Why? Because they can tell you things that you will go through that you don't have to go through when you get the knowledge. If you want to be a businessman, you talk to somebody who's already successful in business. You do your research. I mentioned previously Google and YouTube. Never underestimate the value of mentors. The gentleman on the screen, some of you would have known him. How many of you heard of Dr. Miles Monroe before? Raise your hand. Okay, he was my friend. He was a mentor. He was a counselor. And you see, I was able to avoid a lot of issues, and I was able to learn how to achieve certain things because he had already been there. So he started writing books. And rather than me going from scratch, I just talked to him. And so I started writing books. Before he died, he wrote close to 100 books, I believe. Is that right? Today I've only written 17, but I learn from my mentors. This is another mentor in my life. He was my brother-in-law. In fact, it was him who helped me to turn my life around. We used to play basketball together at that time. And he's a successful pastor in the United States. He owns several communities. It's almost like he owns a city. And his church is like a 5,000 member church, and he does all kinds of things in the community. Bought a Walmart, bought a shopping complex, all kinds of things. And I learned life strategies from talking to mentors. Never underestimate the value of a mentor or a value adder. You know, sometimes you may feel like you want to talk to your friends. That's good. But it's even better to talk to people who know where the rocks are. Touch the person next to you and say, you got to find some people who know where the rocks are. Here's the thing I want you to remember about life. You can learn from mentors or you can learn from mistakes. It's a lot easier to learn from mentors than it is to learn from mistakes. Mistakes cost you a lot more. Here's a question for you. Who are your mentors? How many of you have a mentor right now? You have a person that you talk to. You have an older person, somebody who has wisdom that you talk to. If you don't, you need to find a mentor. Because it's going to save you problems and it's going to add value to your life. Are you with me? So what's the first word? Say it loud. What's the first word? What's the second word? What's the third word? What's the fourth word? Prioritize. Now, let me tell you about prioritize. When you're talking about prioritizing, you have to ask the question, first of all, do I need it? If you need it, then it becomes a priority. But then the next question that you have to ask is, do I need it now? The problem with understanding life is you have to understand if you need it and if you need it now. Sometimes, you know, as a teenager, you may feel like, boy, I really need a relationship. I really need a boyfriend or a girlfriend. But the question is, do you really need it now? Because, you know, a lot of times young people get together and they're 14, 15, and they say, you know, we're going to go together. We go in. But you don't own a car. You don't have no job. Exactly where are you going? To McDonald's, or are you going to Kentucky Fried? Where are you going? Sometimes we believe that we need things. We believe that we need Nike or Gucci, but you may have other priorities. There are people who went to school and they decided to, when they graduated, they decided to buy a car. But you see, a car depreciates in value. So instead of buying a car, you may want a nice car. You might want a nice BMW or Lexus or whatever it is. But if you're just out of college, it may be more important to buy a piece of property and get a used car, because you need a car, but you don't need the particular car that you're talking about right now. Everybody say prioritize. As I get ready to wrap up, I want to share a couple other things. Whatever or whoever increases your value most is your priority. So sometimes you say, well, you know, I have friends, but my friends cause me to get locked up. My friends cause me to get in trouble. Well, they are not increasing your value. You see, friends are like elevators. They can take you to the top or drag you to the bottom. You have to determine whether you have elevator friends or basement friends. You see, do your friends take you down or up? And you have to prioritize the elevator friends, the ones that go up. Focus on what's most important right now. There was a story about a flight in Miami a few years ago, several years ago, and the two pilots saw a warning light, and they both got consumed with the warning light, and they started checking around the cockpit and trying to figure out what this warning light was all about, and in the process, they forgot to fly the plane, and the plane crashed. Touch the person next to you and say, you got to remember to fly the plane. Here are a few important things I want you to remember. Don't die before you're buried. Don't die before you are buried. What am I talking about? There are people who die at 17 and we bury them at 50. What do I mean? You see, if you don't have a dream, if you waste your life, if you don't maximize your potential, you die long before we bury you. That's why you need a dream. That's why you need a vision. When you don't have a dream, you're dead. Here's another thing I want you to remember about prioritization. Go where you can grow. You have to have environmental properties. What do I mean? If you want to grow pineapples, you don't go to Minnesota because it's too cold. You see, whatever you want to grow in your life, you have to find the environment that helps it to grow. So if you want to be a business person, you have to go into a business environment. You see, some people, they end up growing things that they don't want to grow because they're in the wrong environment. So there are people in jail today, and every time I've been to prison, I have never met anyone in prison who said, you know, when I was growing up, my desire was I wanted to be a prisoner. I wanted to go to jail. You know what happened? They went into the wrong environment. They didn't want to grow prison, but they lived in a prison environment. They lived with people who had a prison mentality. What are the priorities that God has set for you? And here's the final one. So what's the first word? What's the second word? What's the third word? What's the fourth word? And here's the final word. The final word is maximize. Everybody say maximize. Now let me tell you about maximizing. You see, in life, you have to maximize and you have to make the most of every opportunity. You only live once. You don't get a second chance. So make the most of every opportunity you have. My mentor, Dr. Miles Monroe, used to put it this way. He said, in life, you want to die empty. You don't want to take your books to the graveyard. You don't want to take your potential to the graveyard because the graveyard is a graveyard. It's where dreams die. So you want to die empty. You want to do everything with your life that you can before you expire. Don't waste time because you cannot recover. Don't waste moments. Every decision matters. When you're young, you may feel like, well, I have a lot of time. But the thing about it is, none of us are born with an expiration date. You know, you go into the food store and they have a product, and on the product it says, expires January 15, 2020. Guess what? You are not born with an expiration date, so you don't know when you're going to die. So you have to live as if every moment counts. You see, you can do several things with time. You can spend time, you can waste time, you can invest time, or you can redeem time. You have to learn how to redeem time. I remember I was on a call one day, and a friend of mine said to me, he said, Dave, you know, I want you to turn on the television. I said, what's on the television? He said, I want you to see what's on there right now. And on the TV was this guy with no arms and no legs, and he was earning $100,000 an hour and flying around on a private jet. And so my friend said to me, he said, Dave, what's our excuse? You see, a lot of us, we have excuses in life not to maximize what we have. But here was this guy, no arms and no legs, but he maximized his opportunity. He realized that he can inspire others by simply telling them how he overcame. So what do you have that you can maximize? Here's another thing I want you to remember. It's very important. Remember this. Win on your level. Stop thinking about who's on the next level. Just win on your level. If you have one hand, win with one hand. If you have one foot, win with 1 foot. If you have $10, win with $10. Remember to develop multiple streams of income. Don't just do one thing. Make progress and not excuses. Never give up. As long as you are alive, you have to maximize. Get the most out of every day, every conversation, every moment. Maximize even if you have to take a dive for it. I don't know how many of you all remember the Olympics a few years ago when Shawnee Miller, she had to dive for the goal. Sometimes you got to dive. Here's another thing I want you to remember. Go to war with the army you have, because the army you wish you had has no bullets. You have to go to war with the army you have. So whatever you have in your life, whatever is available to you, you have to go to war with what you have. Stop waiting for someone else. This young man right here, landlord, he was 13 years old, sleeping in cars. He was a part of a local gang. And myself and a few others, we reached out to him. Today, landlord is a husband, he's a father, he's a recording artist. His music has been on the charts in Germany and Japan. And he has a television program in 17 countries. You got to maximize what you have. This young man right here was from Baintown, from the streets. Raymond, we used to call him 66. And today, he's a husband, he's a father, he's an entrepreneur, he's a pastor. And he came from the streets. This is a photo of me doing a seminar in Israel, 3,000 leaders. How did I get there? How did I get from the streets to on a platform talking to 3,000 leaders in Israel? Because I learned how to maximize. One of the things Dr. Monroe said to me, he said, Dave, if you develop and refine your gift, people will call for you all over the world. And that's what I did. I developed my gift. This is in Africa. This is on a television station doing interviews. This is another shot from doing a segment at a school in South Africa. And so God has blessed me to go around the world because I learned how to maximize. I want you to stand on your feet. And I want to give you a little word of encouragement today as we close. You see, today you may feel like you are ostracized, you are criticized, you are marginalized, you are mistreated, you are defeated, you are castigated, miscalculated, discombobulated, mislabeled, so broke you can't afford cable, misunderstood, called no good, talked about, walked on, lied about, cast in a spirit of doubt, betrayed, dismayed, destiny delayed. That's how you may feel today. But I want to tell you who you really are and who you can become. Here's what I want you to remember today. Today you can be unbroken. You can be outspoken. You can be a certified original and not a token. You can be extraordinary. You can be tremendous. You can be stupendous. You can be remarkable. You can be exceptional. You can be fabulous. You can be wonderful. You can be phenomenal. You can be amazing. You can be legendary. You can be extraordinary. Say this with me. Say, be phenomenal or be forgotten. Thank you.
Years ago, many Bahamians discovered Bahama's Faith Ministries, a revolutionary and impactful ministry, transcending national borders and challenging traditions. The goal then and now was transforming followers into leaders and leaders into agents of change. We have gone through tragedy and triumph and have emerged with a new focus and a renewed vision. Rediscover the worship and the message of the kingdom and see what's new about BFM, now led by Pastor Dave and Angie Burrows, multi-generational leaders focused on making the vision plain to a new generation. There's a place for everyone here. Children, youth, millennials, singles, families, professionals, and entrepreneurs. Join us Sundays at 10 at our Carmichael Road campus or online via the BFMI app. We promise you, your life will never be the same.